The planet of Lyrith was a place where emotions were seen as unnecessary complications. Among its inhabitants, there existed a strict code. Mating was not about connection or affection but rather a duty to ensure the survival of their species. For Lyra, this truth had always been clear. She performed her duties with precision and detachment, never questioning the societal norms that dictated every aspect of life on Lyrith. Lyra's days were filled with routine, tending to crops in the bioluminescent fields, attending mandatory gatherings in the crystalline halls, and occasionally pairing with others for procreation when called upon by the Council of Elders. Her people valued efficiency above all else, and Lyra prided herself on being one of the most efficient. But deep down, buried beneath layers of conditioning, there lingered a faint yearning for something more. Something she couldn't quite name. One day, everything changed. A strange vessel descended from the sky, landing just outside the village. It was unlike anything Lyra had ever seen. Its sleek metallic surface glinted under the twin suns of Lyrith, and an eerie hum emanated from within. The villagers gathered cautiously around it, unsure whether to approach or flee. Then, the hatch opened. Out stepped a figure who looked nothing like them. He was tall, with skin that gleamed golden under the sunlight, and eyes so blue they seemed almost otherworldly. His hair was cropped short, and he wore clothing made of soft, flexible material that clung to his form. He raised his hands slowly, signaling peace, though the villagers remained wary. The Council of Elders demanded answers. Who was he? Why had he come to their world? Through gestures and broken attempts at communication, the stranger introduced himself as Kale, a human explorer from a distant star system. He explained that his ship had malfunctioned during a routine survey mission, leaving him stranded. Despite their initial suspicion, curiosity got the better of the elders, who decided to allow him to stay until repairs could be completed. Kale's presence disrupted the monotony of village life. He asked questions no one had thought to ask before. Why did they live without joy? Why did they suppress feelings instead of embracing them? At first, the villagers dismissed his inquiries as naive ramblings born out of ignorance. But Lyra found herself drawn to him. There was a warmth in his gaze, a sincerity in his voice that made her feel different. As weeks passed, Kale began helping with daily tasks, learning the ways of Lyrith while teaching the villagers snippets of his own culture. He spoke of art, music, love, concepts foreign yet strangely captivating to Lyra. One evening, as they worked side by side harvesting glowing fruits, Kale turned to her and said, "You're different, aren't you?" Lyra froze, unsure how to respond. Different wasn't a compliment on Lyrith. It often meant standing out in ways that defied tradition. Yet Kale's tone held no judgment, only genuine interest. "What do you mean?" she asked hesitantly. "You think," he replied simply. "I can see it in your eyes. You question things. Most here follow orders without hesitation, but you wonder." His words unsettled her. Was he right? Did she truly question the way of life she'd always known? Before she could respond, the sound of footsteps interrupted them. Another villager approached, reminding them both that work must continue. But Kale's observation lingered in Lyra's mind long after the day ended. That night, lying in her small sleeping pod, Lyra stared up at the translucent ceiling, watching the stars twinkle above. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to live freely, to act not out of obligation but desire. And though she didn't yet understand it, she knew Kale had planted a seed within her, one that would soon begin to grow. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension for Lyra. She found herself observing Kale more closely, noting the way he moved through the village with an ease that seemed almost alien to her people. His laughter echoed in spaces where silence had always reigned, and his questions, though often met with confusion or dismissal, continued to challenge the rigid beliefs of those around him. Kale's curiosity extended beyond just words. He began introducing small changes into their routines, things that seemed trivial at first but gradually shifted the atmosphere of the village. One morning, he brought out a device from his ship, a small, glowing orb that emitted soft, melodic tones. When activated, it filled the air with sounds unlike anything the villagers had ever heard. Some were unsettled by it, while others stood transfixed, as if hearing music for the very first time. Lyra was among those who couldn't look away. The melodies stirred something deep inside her, a longing she couldn't quite place. As the notes swirled around her, she felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, a reaction so foreign that she quickly turned away, embarrassed. But Cale noticed. Without saying a word, he approached her later that evening, holding the orb gently in his hands. "Do you like it?" he asked softly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the village. She hesitated before nodding. "It feels strange," she admitted. "But also nice." Cale smiled, a warmth spreading across his face. "Music is one of the ways my people express what they feel inside. It's not just sound, it's emotion, memory, connection." He paused, tilting his head slightly as if studying her. "Your people don't have anything like this?" Lyra shook her head. "We don't need it. We focus on survival, efficiency. Emotions only get in the way." For a moment, Cale said nothing. Then, with a thoughtful expression, he handed her the orb. "Keep it for tonight. See how it makes you feel." She wanted to refuse, to insist that such indulgences were unnecessary. But something in his gaze stopped her. Reluctantly, she took the orb and carried it back to her sleeping pod. That night, as the stars shimmered above, she activated the device again. The music wrapped around her like a comforting embrace, and for the first time in her life, Lyra allowed herself to simply feel. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, her dreams were vivid and filled with colors she'd never imagined. As the weeks passed, Cale continued to integrate himself into village life, though not everyone welcomed his presence. The Council of Elders grew increasingly uneasy, their suspicions mounting. They saw his influence as disruptive, a threat to the order they had worked so hard to maintain. Whispers spread among the villagers, warning against becoming too attached to the outsider. Despite this, Cale remained undeterred. He sought out opportunities to connect with individuals, sharing stories of his home planet and encouraging them to share theirs. For Lyra, these moments became a lifeline. She found herself spending more time with him, listening intently as he described vast oceans, towering mountains, and cities alive with light and energy. Each story painted a picture of a world so different from Lyrith that it felt almost mythical. One afternoon, as they walked together along the edge of the bioluminescent fields, Cale stopped suddenly and turned to face her. "Why do you stay here?" he asked, his tone serious yet gentle. "You're curious, intelligent, you could explore, discover new things. Why let them dictate your entire life?" Lyra blinked, caught off guard by the question. "This is my home," she replied after a pause. "It's all I've ever known." "But does it make you happy?" he pressed. "Do you feel fulfilled living like this?" His words struck a nerve. No one had ever dared to ask her such a thing before. Happiness wasn't something her people prioritized. Fulfillment was measured by contribution, not personal satisfaction. Yet, as she looked into Cale's piercing blue eyes, she realized she didn't know how to answer. Before she could respond, a sharp call interrupted them. An elder stood nearby, glaring disapprovingly. "Lyra, come! You're needed elsewhere." Reluctantly, she nodded and followed, casting one last glance over her shoulder at Cale. His expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of concern in his gaze. That evening, the council summoned Lyra to the crystalline hall. The air was thick with unease as she entered, finding herself surrounded by stern-faced elders. At the center of the room stood Cale, flanked by 2 guards. Her stomach tightened as she realized why she'd been called. "The human has overstayed his welcome," one of the elders declared, their voice cold and unyielding. "His ideas are dangerous, corrupting our way of life. He must leave." Lyra stepped forward instinctively. "But his ship isn't repaired yet," she argued, surprising even herself with her boldness. "If he leaves now, he'll die. And if he stays, we risk losing everything we've built." Another elder countered sharply. "We cannot afford weakness." "Weakness?" Cale interjected, his tone calm but firm. "Is it weak to care for one another?" To seek understanding instead of fear? The elders ignored him, turning their attention back to Lyra. You've spent too much time with him, one said accusingly. It ends now. Return to your duties and forget these distractions. Lyra opened her mouth to protest but stopped herself. What could she say? They wouldn't listen. Defeated, she lowered her head and backed away, her heart pounding in her chest. As she left the hall, she glanced back once more at Cale. He gave her a small, reassuring smile, though his eyes betrayed a sadness she hadn't seen before. In that moment, she realized something. She didn't want him to go. Not because of duty or obligation, but because he made her feel alive in a way nothing else ever had. And for the first time, Lyra understood what it meant to truly yearn, for freedom, for connection, for love. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Cale remained in the village, but his movements were now closely monitored. The elders had forbidden him from interacting freely with the villagers, citing concerns about the disruption he was causing. Lyra felt the weight of their decision pressing down on her. She tried to focus on her tasks, harvesting crops, maintaining the fields, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Cale. At night, she would lie awake, staring at the orb he had given her. Its soft glow illuminated the walls of her sleeping pod, casting shadows that danced like ghosts of emotions she couldn't quite name. She replayed their conversations in her mind, each word lingering like an echo. Why do you stay here? Does it make you happy? His questions haunted her, forcing her to confront parts of herself she'd long buried. One evening, unable to bear the silence any longer, Lyra slipped out of her pod and made her way to the edge of the village. The air was cool, carrying with it the faint scent of the bioluminescent flowers. She found Cale sitting alone by the fields, gazing up at the twin moons that hung low in the sky. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure if she should approach. But then he turned and saw her, his face lighting up with a smile that made her heart skip a beat. You shouldn't be here, he said softly, though there was no reproach in his voice. If they catch you, I don't care, she replied, surprising herself with the honesty of her words. She sat down beside him, feeling the cool grass beneath her fingers. They can't control everything. Cale chuckled, a sound both bitter and amused. You'd be amazed how often people try. He paused, studying her profile in the moonlight. How are you holding up? Lyra sighed, her shoulders slumping. I don't know anymore. Everything feels wrong. Like I'm waking up from a dream I didn't realize I was having. That's what happens when you start questioning, Cale said gently. It's uncomfortable, even painful sometimes. But it's also freeing. She glanced at him, searching his face for answers. What do I do? How do I fix this? You can't fix it all at once, he admitted. But you can start by deciding what matters most to you. What do you want, Lyra? Not what they tell you to want, what you want. His question hung in the air between them, heavy and unanswerable. Lyra looked away, her gaze falling on the glowing fields. She wanted so many things, yet none of them seemed possible within the confines of her world. Freedom, connection, joy. They were concepts she barely understood, let alone knew how to pursue. And yet, sitting there with Cale, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way. Over the next few days, Lyra began to notice subtle changes in herself. She started questioning the rules that had once seemed immutable, wondering why they existed in the first place. Why must mating be devoid of emotion? Why must efficiency outweigh happiness? Why must curiosity be suppressed? Her newfound awareness didn't go unnoticed. Other villagers began to treat her differently, some with suspicion, others with quiet admiration. A young girl named Nira, who often helped in the fields, approached her one afternoon with wide eyes. Is it true what they're saying? She whispered. That you've been talking to the outsider? Lyra hesitated before nodding. Yes. Why? Nira glanced around nervously before leaning closer. He says we can choose our own paths. That we don't have to live the way the elders say. Is that true? Lyra's chest tightened. She hadn't realized her actions might inspire others to question the status quo. I don't know, she admitted. But maybe we deserve to find out. The girl nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. As she walked away, Lyra felt a strange mix of pride and fear. She was treading dangerous ground, and she knew it. Yet, the idea of turning back felt impossible. Meanwhile, tensions between Kale and the elders reached a breaking point. One morning, as Lyra worked in the fields, shouts erupted from the center of the village. Dropping her tools, she ran toward the commotion, her heart racing. A crowd had gathered around Kale, who stood defiantly before the elders, his hands clenched into fists. "You can't keep me here against my will!" he shouted, his voice ringing out with determination. "I've done nothing wrong! The fault lies not in your actions but in your influence," one elder replied coldly. "Your presence threatens the harmony of our society. You must leave, or we will ensure you do." Kale's jaw tightened, but he didn't back down. Harmony built on oppression isn't harmony, it's control. If you truly cared about your people, you'd listen to them instead of silencing them. The elders bristled, their faces darkening with anger. Before they could respond, Lyra pushed her way through the crowd, stepping forward to stand beside Kale. Gasps rippled through the assembly as she raised her voice, trembling but resolute. "He's right," she said, her words cutting through the tension like a blade. "We've lived in fear for too long, afraid to ask questions, afraid to feel. But we're more than machines. We're alive, and we deserve better." For a moment there was silence. Then chaos erupted. Voices rose in outrage, accusations flying as the elders demanded order. Through it all, Kale reached out and took Lyra's hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "Whatever happens next," he murmured, "we'll face it together." As the crowd closed in around them, Lyra felt a surge of courage she hadn't known she possessed. For the first time in her life, she wasn't acting out of duty or obligation. She was choosing, for herself, for her future, and for the possibility of something greater. The standoff in the village square felt like a storm on the verge of breaking. The elders glared at Lyra and Kale, their expressions a mix of fury and disbelief. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some voices filled with outrage, others with quiet support. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire foundation of Lyra's society was trembling under the weight of Lyra's defiance. "You dare challenge us?" one elder bellowed, his voice cutting through the chaos. "This is treason, Lyra. You shame yourself and your ancestors." Lyra flinched but didn't back down. She could feel Kale's hand still gripping hers, steady and unwavering. It gave her strength she hadn't known she possessed. "I'm not shaming anyone," she said, her voice louder now, fueled by a determination that surprised even herself. "I'm asking for change, for hope. Isn't that what our ancestors wanted when they built this world? A better future?" The elder faltered, his confidence wavering for the briefest moment. But then he straightened, his tone icy. "Hope without order is chaos. And chaos leads to destruction. Remove them," he ordered, gesturing to the guards standing nearby. Before anyone could move, Kale stepped forward, placing himself between Lyra and the approaching guards. "If you take her, you'll have to take me too," he declared, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "But know this, if you silence her, you silence everyone who dares to dream of something more." His words struck a chord. Several villagers exchanged uneasy glances, and a few even shifted closer to Lyra and Kale, forming a loose barrier against the guards. The tension in the air was palpable, each side waiting to see who would make the next move. Finally, another elder raised a hand, signaling for calm. "Enough," he said, his voice quieter but no less authoritative. "We will deliberate on this matter. Until then, the outsider and Lyra are confined to their quarters. No exceptions." Though far from a victory, it was a reprieve. As the crowd dispersed, Lyra felt a mixture of relief and frustration swirling inside her. She glanced at Kale, who offered her a small, reassuring smile. Together, they walked back to her sleeping pod, the weight of what had just happened settling over them like a heavy blanket. That night, sleep eluded Lyra. She sat cross-legged on the floor, staring at the orb Kale had given her. Its soft glow pulsed rhythmically, almost as if it were alive. She thought about everything that had transpired, the confrontation, the murmurs of dissent among the villagers, the look of anger and fear on the elders' faces. Most of all, she thought about Kale. He sat across from her, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. "You okay?" he asked quietly, breaking the silence. She nodded, though the gesture felt hollow. "I don't know what I expected," she admitted. "Part of me thought maybe they'd listen. Maybe they'd understand." "They're scared," Kale replied. "Change always scares people, especially when it challenges everything they believe in. But fear doesn't last forever. Once people start seeing the possibilities, they won't want to go back." "But what if they never see it?" Lyra countered, her voice tinged with desperation. "What if they shut us down completely? What then?" Kale leaned forward, his blue eyes locking onto hers. "Then we find another way. We keep fighting, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who's too afraid to fight for themselves. Trust me, Lyra. Change starts small, but it grows. Sometimes, all it takes is one person brave enough to stand up." His words ignited a spark within her, a flicker of resolve that burned brighter than her doubts. She took a deep breath, letting his conviction wash over her. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay. We'll keep going. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Kale smiled, and for the first time since the confrontation, Lyra felt a glimmer of hope. The next morning, rumors spread quickly through the village. Word of Lyra's defiance had reached every corner, sparking debates and whispered conversations. Some villagers praised her courage, while others condemned her actions as reckless. The divide was growing, and the elders struggled to maintain control. Lyra and Kale remained confined to her sleeping pod, but they weren't idle. Using scraps of materials scavenged from Kale's ship, they began working on a plan, a way to amplify their message and reach more people. Kale explained how technology could be used to broadcast ideas, bypassing the elders' attempts to silence them. "It's risky," he warned as they tinkered with wires and circuits. "If they catch us, there's no telling what they'll do." "I know," Lyra replied, her hands steady as she worked. "But we can't stop now. Not when so much is at stake." By the third day of their confinement, their makeshift device was ready. It wasn't perfect, but it would serve its purpose. That night, under the cover of darkness, they activated it. A low hum filled the air as the device sent out a signal, carrying a simple yet powerful message. "You deserve to live with joy, not just duty. You deserve to choose your own path." At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, lights began to appear in the distance, torches held by villagers who had heard the broadcast and ventured out to investigate. One by one, they gathered outside Lyra's pod, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. Among them was Nira, clutching a glowing flower in her hands. "We're with you," she said simply, her voice filled with quiet determination. Others nodded in agreement, their expressions resolute. Tears welled up in Lyra's eyes as she stepped outside to join them. For the first time, she truly understood the power of connection, the strength that came from standing together. Beside her, Kale placed a hand on her shoulder, his presence a constant reminder of why they were doing this. The elders wouldn't stay silent for long. But for now, in this moment, Lyra knew they had taken the first step towards something greater. And she was ready to keep moving forward, no matter what lay ahead. The gathering outside Lyra's sleeping pod swelled as more villagers arrived, drawn by the broadcast. The flickering torches cast dancing shadows on the ground, creating an atmosphere both tense and hopeful. For the first time in their lives, these people were stepping out of line, defying the rigid structure that had governed every aspect of their existence. It was a fragile rebellion, but it burned with quiet determination. Lyra stood at the center of it all, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never imagined herself leading anything, let alone a movement, but here she was, surrounded by faces looking to her for guidance. Kale remained close by, his presence steady and reassuring. Together, they addressed the crowd, their voices carrying over the murmurs. We don't have to live like this, Lyra began, her words trembling but filled with conviction. We've been told our whole lives that emotions are dangerous, that connection is weakness. But look around you. Look at each other. Don't you feel stronger together? Don't you want more than just survival? Her question hung in the air, met with nods and murmurs of agreement. Nira stepped forward, holding up the glowing flower she had brought. This is what we're fighting for, she said, her voice clear despite her youth. For beauty, for joy, for life beyond duty. The crowd erupted into soft cheers, a sound so unfamiliar yet profoundly moving. Lyra felt tears prick at her eyes as she realized how far they had come in such a short time. These people weren't just following her, they were choosing to believe in something greater, something worth risking everything for. But the moment of unity was fleeting. A sharp whistle cut through the night, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps marching in unison. The elders had arrived, flanked by guards armed with energy rods. Their expressions were grim, their intentions clear. This ends now, one elder declared, his voice cold and commanding. Return to your homes or face the consequences. The villagers hesitated, fear creeping into their resolve. Lyra clenched her fists, refusing to let the momentum falter. No, she said firmly, stepping forward. You can't silence us anymore. We won't go back to living half-lives. The elder's eyes narrowed, and he gestured to the guards. Seize them. Before anyone could act, Kale moved swiftly, activating a small device strapped to his wrist. A burst of light erupted from it, momentarily blinding the guards and scattering the crowd. Chaos ensued as villagers scattered in different directions, disappearing into the darkness. Lyra grabbed Nira's hand and pulled her toward the fields, where tall bioluminescent stalks provided cover. Keep running, Kale urged, staying behind to block the guards' pursuit. His plan worked, for now. As Lyra and Nira ducked behind a cluster of glowing plants, the sounds of shouting grew distant. What happens next? Nira whispered, her wide eyes reflecting the faint light. Lyra took a deep breath, steadying herself. We regroup. Find the others. And then, we fight. Over the next few days, the village became a battleground of whispers and secrets. Small groups of rebels convened in hidden locations, sharing information and strategizing under the cover of darkness. Lyra and Kale became the de facto leaders of the movement, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. They spent hours discussing plans, debating tactics, and dreaming of a future free from oppression. One evening, as they sat together beneath the twin moons, Kale turned to Lyra with a thoughtful expression. Do you ever wonder what it would be like? He asked softly. To leave this place, start over somewhere new? Lyra hesitated, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. I think about it sometimes, she admitted. But I don't know if leaving is the answer. This is our home. If we run away, we're letting them win. Kale nodded, understanding her perspective. You're right. Running doesn't solve anything. But staying means facing them head-on, and that's not going to be easy. I know, Lyra replied, her voice firm despite the weight of what lay ahead. But I'm done being afraid. If we can show everyone that there's another way to live, maybe we can change things for good. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a runner, a young man named Jorin, who had been tasked with keeping watch on the elders' movements. He approached cautiously, his breathing heavy from exertion. They're planning something big, he reported, his tone urgent. They've called a meeting tomorrow morning, mandatory attendance for everyone. They're going to try to stamp this out once and for all. Lyra exchanged a glance with Kale, her mind racing. Then we strike first, she said decisively. Tonight. We gather everyone we can and confront them directly. Show them we're not backing down. Kale nodded in agreement. It's risky, but it might be our only chance. As Jorin hurried off to spread the word, Lyra turned to Kale, her resolve hardening. Whatever happens tomorrow, promise me one thing. Anything, he said without hesitation. That no matter what, we stay together. No running. No giving up. Kale reached out and took her hand, his grip warm and unwavering. "I promise." Under the cover of darkness, the rebels assembled in the fields, their numbers larger than Lyra had dared to hope. Torches illuminated determined faces, united by a shared purpose. Lyra stood before them, her voice steady as she addressed the group. "This isn't just about us," she said, her words carrying across the gathered crowd. "It's about every person who's ever felt trapped, who's ever been told they weren't enough. Tonight we show them that we are enough, that we deserve better." A cheer rose from the group, a sound of defiance and hope. As they prepared to march toward the village square, Lyra felt a surge of courage unlike anything she'd ever known. They were outnumbered and outmatched, but they had something the elders didn't: belief. When dawn broke, the village would awaken to find its people standing together, ready to demand a new way of life. And though the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, Lyra knew one thing for certain: they had already begun to change the world. As the first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, the rebels moved as one, a tide of determination flowing toward the village square. The air was thick with anticipation, each step accompanied by the soft rustle of clothing and the occasional murmur of encouragement. Lyra led the way, her head held high despite the weight of what lay ahead. Beside her, Cale walked with equal resolve, his presence a constant reminder that she wasn't alone. The elders were waiting for them, their expressions unreadable but their postures tense. They stood in a tight circle at the center of the square, flanked by guards who gripped their energy rods tightly. The sight sent a ripple of unease through the crowd, but no one faltered. One by one, the villagers filled the space around them, their torches casting flickering shadows on the crystalline walls. For a moment there was silence, a fragile pause before the storm broke. Then an elder stepped forward, his voice cutting through the stillness like a blade. "You defy us," he said, his tone sharp and accusatory. "You threaten the very foundation of our society. Do you truly believe chaos is preferable to order?" Lyra stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "We don't seek chaos," she replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. "We seek balance. A life where duty and emotion coexist, where connection isn't seen as weakness but strength." The elder sneered, dismissing her words with a wave of his hand. "Emotion leads to disorder. Disorder leads to ruin. You are blinded by false hope." "No," Cale interjected, stepping beside Lyra. His voice carried a quiet authority that silenced the murmurs in the crowd. "What blinds you is fear. Fear of change, fear of losing control. But control isn't leadership, it's oppression. And your people deserve better." The accusation struck a nerve. Murmurs rippled through the assembled villagers, some nodding in agreement, while others looked uncertain. The elders exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence beginning to waver. Lyra seized the moment, raising her voice so it carried across the square. "Look around you!" she called out, gesturing to the faces surrounding them. "These are your people. Your families, your neighbors, your friends. Are you really willing to destroy them just to hold on to power?" Her words ignited something in the crowd. Voices rose in support, echoing her defiance. "Enough!" another elder shouted, slamming his staff against the ground. "This ends now." Before anyone could react, the guards surged forward, their energy rods crackling with blue light. Panic erupted as the villagers scrambled to retreat, but Lyra stood her ground, refusing to back down. She locked eyes with the lead elder, her expression fierce. "If you want to stop us, you'll have to go through every single one of us." The standoff froze everyone in place. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the hum of the energy rods and the labored breathing of those present. Then, unexpectedly, a figure pushed through the crowd, a young woman named Lyra, who had always been fiercely loyal to the elders. Her hands trembled as she stepped forward, her voice breaking the tension. "She's right," Lyra said, her words barely audible at first. She swallowed hard and spoke louder. "She's right. We've lived in fear for too long. I don't want this anymore." Her declaration sent shockwaves through the assembly. One by one, other voices joined hers, some hesitant, others bold. The tide was turning, and the elders could feel it slipping away from them. Their faces twisted with anger and desperation as they realized they were losing control. "You fools!" one elder roared, pointing an accusing finger at Lyra and Kale. "Do you think this will bring peace? This will tear us apart." "No," Lyra countered, her voice ringing out clear and unwavering. "This will bring us together. For the first time, we're choosing, not being told what to do. That's not tearing us apart, it's making us whole." The final blow came when Nira stepped forward, holding up the glowing flower she had carried since the beginning. "This is who we are," she said simply, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "Not machines or tools, but people. And we deserve to live like people." The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices rising in unison. Overwhelmed, the elders stumbled backward, their authority crumbling before their eyes. Without another word, they turned and fled, disappearing into the shadows of the crystalline halls. In the days that followed, the village transformed. The rigid structures that had once governed their lives began to loosen, replaced by open discussions and shared decision-making. Emotions once suppressed found expression in art, music, and laughter. The fields glowed brighter than ever, as if reflecting the newfound joy within the villagers. Lyra and Kale stood side by side, watching the changes unfold. Though challenges remained, the sense of unity was undeniable. One evening, as they walked along the edge of the bioluminescent fields, Kale turned to her with a smile. "You did it," he said softly. "You changed everything." Lyra shook her head, her gaze thoughtful. "We did it. Together." Kale reached for her hand, his touch warm and familiar. "And wherever we go from here, we'll face it together too." Under the twin moons, their fingers intertwined, a promise sealed not just between two people, but between a world learning to embrace life in all its complexity.